Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, August 7th. Derek Van Riper here with Eno Saris. On this episode, we have a lot of news and notes to get to. Tons of injury news. It's like the last wave of pitching injuries, hopefully, for the season. Got a bunch of guys that came back, but a bunch of guys that went on the shelf. So we just traded some previously healthy pitchers for previously injured ones. I guess that's better than not getting the injured guys back, but it's still disappointing. One really big punch over the weekend landed by Jose Ramírez. We'll talk about that. Yuri Perez is back. We've got Chase Silseth dealing in that Angels rotation, so we'll see if there's something going on there. And then a nice group of mailbag questions on a Mailbag Monday. I think we have to start with the melee between the Guardians and White Sox. Jose Ramírez throwing one of the most effective punches I have ever seen on a baseball field, dropping Tim Anderson with one punch. And I was reading a little bit about this. Jose Ramírez would train a little bit or do some boxing training like years ago, like a decade ago. And the punch he threw on Tim Anderson was a right. And if Jose Ramírez had hit him with a left, which is what he wanted to do, he may have been able to do even more damage.
That's it was a crazy moment. I mean, shades of Roof Net or Door, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I couldn't tell right away what he was so mad about, honestly, because there's no, like, Tim Anderson is tagging him, but when I tried to slow it down on the, like, whatever I was looking at on Twitter, and I was like, maybe he got him in the face. I don't know. He stands over him a little bit, Tim Anderson over Jose Ramírez, but it's almost like it's not a bad thing in a way because he's open his leg, so he hasn't put a leg down that, like, Jose Ramírez is, like, going to slide into. So he kind of stands around the base and tries to tag Jose Ramírez as he slides between his legs. It's not that bad, but I guess maybe he tagged him hard in the face, and then I guess there's been a long-term bad blood between them. There's something last night, the night before, Tim Anderson had pushed Brian Rocchio's hand off of the bag to get an out. And then apparently he'd also flicked off the entire Cleveland bench at one point. And then during that game, he was jawing at Arias for some reason. So this was, I think, a little bit less about what happened in the moment and a little bit of culmination of some long-term beef. And even in the Odor case, you didn't quite have the same squaring up. I mean, this was like, this was like turned into a boxing match. I think the most hilarious part of it is how the umpire at first is going to break them up and then sees them square up and just is like, nope,
just backs out. Yep, just like a referee.
I'm not getting knocked out in this one. You guys go at it.
This is not going to be good for me if I stand in here. So he let it happen. And I mean, the Ramírez punch too. He was being like partially restrained and sort of pulled away. I think Michael Kopech was kind of in the way.
Large human being,
and he still got that punch in, which was pretty impressive. So suspensions are almost certainly coming down. I saw Jose Ramírez had a couple of steals on Sunday. He's playing really well right now too. So the suspension would come at a pretty difficult time. And I think Tim Anderson, on top of a suspension, he looked concussed. Like, he fell like he was concussed. He walked off the field like he was concussed. And I don't know if we've seen any updates yet outlining that, but I think that's part of the story here as well. His season, he's hit rock bottom. I mean, Tim Anderson has hit this unexpected rock bottom this year as a result of what just happened on the field Saturday night. But leading up to that, we kept wondering, is he healthy? Is his shoulder still bothering him? He's got one home run this season. That's part of this stretch since the start of July, where he's hit 281 with a 325 OBP. That's a little better than where he was, but a 351 slug. So you could look at this as a lost season for Tim Anderson. I think there are a lot of questions about what's going to happen this winter. Is he going to finish the contract he's got with the White Sox? Is he going to get traded somewhere else? And can he bounce back? Those are all questions we've started to tackle on various episodes over the course of this season, but it just doesn't seem like things could get any worse for this guy. He's had a miserable 2023 season, and now he's probably going to miss more time.
Yeah, I wonder. There's a weird other news about the White Sox coming in today about Kenyon Middleton making some comments to ESPN. Here's what he said. He said, we came in with no rules. I don't know how you police the culture if there are no rules or guidelines to follow because everyone is doing their own thing. Like, how do you say anything about it? Because there are no rules. You have rookies sleeping in the bullpen during the game. So there's obviously some sort of long-term White Sox culture that somehow feeds into it. The reason I brought it up is because I just wonder, how aggressive or how by the book, how by the rules are they going to be on this concussion thing? Do you think he went into concussion protocol? Or was it just like, oh, boys will be boys, they fought, yeah, he took a good one, and and he's back out there as soon as the suspension's over, So we've just seen with Anthony Rizzo that it's still possible in today's baseball, where there are supposed to be rules about how you deal with a concussion, that teams don't necessarily either catch every symptom or players don't report every symptom. People can fall between the tracks. Anthony Rizzo is now on the IL for a concussion he got months ago.
Yeah, it happened in May. Late May, he had a collision with Fernando Tatis Jr., and he has not played well in the stretch since then. It's really, the concussion is at least an explanation for what happened to Anthony Rizzo. Why did he fall off so much? And I think Rizzo came out and said he didn't think this was organizational failure in some combination of words. That was the gist of what I got from his camp. But if you're the Yankees, you're still kind of wondering, wait, why did we miss this? How did we miss this? This was a pretty big gaffe for their organization. Now, I think the thing about the White Sox that's really interesting is that we know they got a first-year manager, Pedro Grifol, first-year manager. Keynan Middleton did not play for the White Sox last year, but he had heard a lot of the same things were happening under Tony La Russa. So there's this organizational sort of problem, which probably has something to do with expectations that have been in the clubhouse for a few years, like some of the holdover players, right? Jose Abreu's gone, but you think about the core of Abreu and Anderson, Yohan Moncada, Luis Robert, the players that have been there for a while, like they would also have something to do with the internal culture of the club. And it's really surprising to me.
Maybe even more than a first-year manager.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it's more than that. It seems this seems like the kind of story that usually is reported about the Angels, right? This is like JV stuff from the White Sox. It's really disappointing. It sort of explains, like, well, why is this organization with this talent in that division getting such poor results? It's things like this. It's players sleeping through games in the bullpen. It's missing meetings. All these things that have come out. So I don't know. I don't know how
is there any corollary here to the Yankees? I mean, the Yankees keep winning and making the postseason, and they're always great teams. Are they underperforming how great they are, though? Should they have won it all by now? Is this team, at least this year, underperforming expectations? I mean, that has to be a yes, that last one.
I don't know.
Anyway, well, Rizzo is clear that he does not blame the Yankees. However, I am not sure that, I can't make my own decision just because, I think communication is key, and communication is the biggest thing that a manager can bring to the table. And the best thing that Bob Melvin ever did for all those A's teams was keep open lines of communication with every player about their current role, about their future role, about where they can be and what they have to do to get there. And that's how he managed to do all those A's teams where everybody was in platoons and doing this and doing that and, up and down, and veterans that were coming in there and having to take lesser roles and stuff like that. Melvin was just a great communicator. And I think that's true of Bochy too. Like, he's a calm person that tells you how it is. And, everybody understands where they stand with Bruce Bochy. So I just wonder if, you hear stuff about like Aaron Hicks saying, I didn't know, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know what my role was. That's weird. And then you put this Rizzo thing in there, and you just sort of like look at a team that doesn't seem to. And then the Germán thing is crazy too. I mean, just the fact that it got to this point with Domingo Germán, who must be dealing with something, in terms of an addiction issue, because there was alcohol involved in his domestic violence case. So you have a guy who already had a domestic violence case with alcohol involved. I'm sure this wasn't the first time that Domingo Germán was drunk in the clubhouse. I mean, I don't have reporting on that. I'm just saying, there's like, you have an ongoing issue, and then this thing happens, and then the response is like, sweat it out in the sauna and stuff. It's like,
yeah, right. That seemed really weird. As far as like, what are the people in the room? What are the adults in the room? The healthcare professionals around this club actually doing? If that's the response to that situation,
a little bit of machismo runs through these things.
Sure.
Aaron Hicks, just play better. Domingo, just go sweat it out. Yeah, Rizzo, you got a headache? Psh, whatever.
I mean, that's what it certainly seems like from the outside looking in. To your broader question
this is not based on a lot of reporting, but I had heard some of those details about the fight before the Germán stuff before it came out, and I was like, this is crazy that this could happen in a major league clubhouse.
The Yankees underperforming expectations. Okay, well, whose expectations, right? The expectations of projection systems or the expectations of fans? One of those is
both
grounded in more reality than the other. And yeah, they've underperformed fan expectations for sure. That's understandable given what is expected from the Yankees each and every year. We've also talked over the years about the limitations of projections with older players, how older player projections are more likely to lead us astray. They're more likely to be overly optimistic because injuries and massive decline in performance is more likely to occur for players that are older. You
did not project Josh Donaldson for this season.
Yeah, I think
but it was totally possible.
It was totally possible. The tricky thing is that you've got a combination of a lot of things that have gone wrong there. Carlos Rodón was a big free agent addition, and it just has not worked out from a health perspective. How many days during the regular season do you think Carlos Rodón has been 100% healthy this year? He's made 6 starts. He's got an ERA over 7. Like, this isn't close to the guy that we've seen the last 2 seasons with the Giants and the White Sox. I feel awful that he's hurt again. He's going to have an MRI on his hamstring. It's a lost season, and it's year 1 of a long-term deal. And I wondered, even before this hamstring injury this weekend, if we reached a point where the Yankees were mathematically eliminated from the postseason, with a couple weeks to play, if shutting Rodón down early might have been something on their roadmap, just to let him reset and try to go into 2024 with a clean bill of health, because this has just been miserable. So you take something like that, you pair it with Judge's toe injury. Those were 2 massive hits for a team that probably had a thinner margin for error than we're accustomed to.
Yeah. And then if you add it all up, you're right that the difference between sort of fan expectation and projection expectation does exist, because they're a 518 team. They've, in terms of winning percentage, they're only projected to be a 533 team. So if you look at sort of rest of season projections, they're no longer in the top 10. And so there has been a recalibration of expectations from a numbers standpoint, just looking at the talent that's on the field. And some of that comes, I think, from in-season adjustments to projections for Rodón, and as well as Luis Severino, who I have to believe is also a health reason. I look at the velo for Rodón as, that's an easy place for me to find some issues, but end of last season, he was 94 to 96, and this season he's been 94 to 96. James Paxton told me that, I don't know why the velo on a breaking ball is not back. So I'm looking at breaking ball velo as a proxy for health too, And Carlos Rodón's breaking ball this year has been, in every start, the worst start was 84.8. In the last 3 starts, it's been 86 basically. And that's basically where it was last year. So I don't see a reason for Rodón in the numbers. I don't see it in the round numbers, but in the results, obviously it's there. Severino, a little slightly different story because, I don't think the velo numbers tell the same story necessarily. His sliders is down a little bit this year. But again, actually, somewhat similar. The velo's there. He's just not healthy, or somehow it's in the command. Maybe it's showing in poor command. Neither one of these guys is really, I would say like a 60 command guy. So in any case, those two are some of the biggest pitching busts of the year.
Yeah, and you factor in Nestor Cortez missing a lot of time this year with injury. He's important to them.
At least looked good when he got back.
Had their third best pitching projection going into the season by WAR. So if you take half a season away from him on top of the Rodón problems and Severino problems, it's easy to see why the pitching's been so bad. We talk a lot about how this team has a good supporting cast with Aaron Judge, but not necessarily a great supporting cast with him. I think that's been kind of
they had to find Jake Bauers on the waiver wire heap. So it wasn't, that's not the greatest supporting cast if you're still out there scrounging around the waiver wires.
And look, other teams deal with their share of injuries. This just seemed like the combination of injuries the Yankees had happened to a group of players that they just did not have the means to replace. The injury bug bit the exact right group of players for them to fall well short of expectations so far. What does this mean for Rodón long term? Like thinking about his past injuries before these two good seasons and now tacking this on in 2023. I mean, where do you think your expectations are going to be for the future with him? Do you think we can get something close to the result of 2022 again over even 150 innings? I mean, I think he's one of those players you would never project for whatever your full workload number is. You're taking 20 or 25% off of that, given all the stuff that Rodón's had to deal with over the course of his career.
Yeah, it's tough because he's been so good when he's been in, recently at least. And you could say, hey, what if he just gave you 2021 this year? Like you could have said that when you were drafting him and been like, hey, I'm just hoping to get 130 innings of excellent baseball from Carlos Rodón. Like even if he's hurt some and he's out some, like when he's in, he'll be good. And, I don't care. So next year you could say, hey, he's so cheap. If I just get 100 innings from him, the reality of the situation is like, now it's beginning to look like 100 or 130 is a good outcome from him, and that the medium outcome might be below 100. I mean, I know 2020 is a short season, but he basically missed all of that. You got 2019 where he had 34 innings pitched, 2017, 69 innings pitched. I don't know what's the over under on innings pitched for Carlos Rodón next season? I think it might be like 99.
I was going to go a little higher. I was going to go more like 140. I was going to shoot for 2021.
140 he's done twice in his career.
Yeah.
I think that's too aggressive. If you do 120, he's done 120 5 times in his career.
All right, so let's go with 120. And I think
go to 120. Like but there's so many leagues where the shape of that 120 really matters.
Well, yeah, because holding injured players is brutal. Having guys at the end of the season and head-to-head is brutal. Yeah. So that's always part of the problem. I think if you begin with draft and hold and NFBC style leagues, you're probably going to see Carlos Rodón fall right around that pick 150 mark. Every year, that's where the injured, talented pitchers go. It's where Clayton Kershaw's lived for a few seasons, it seems. It's where Rodón was, I think, coming off of his 2021 season. So I think he's going right back in that range again where you say, hey, if this works, I'm getting ace ratios and strikeout rate over a partial season. Maybe it's 3/4 of a season if it all works well, and it's 2/3 of a season is my baseline expectation. And maybe that's fair value. We know you can't have a roster full of guys like that because you'll end up in a situation like the 2023 Yankees where you're chasing the waiver wire. You're chasing replacement level guys. Okay, so we fortunately will have 2 more months to see what happens before having to make decisions on this. But I could actually see myself with a clean bill of health through the winter being interested in a bounce back. I can't look at Rodón and say talent's gone just like that, because this is part of the package. This has been who he's been for a long time. I think this is even harder to decide on right now when you look at Shane McClanahan, who's down with forearm tightness right now. You think about McClanahan and his recent injury history. Earlier this year, it was back tightness. He had a back issue that was similar to that back in 2021. He had that shoulder impingement that put him on the IL late last season, right? We all remember him warming up in the bullpen and not starting that game.
Walking straight off, yeah.
Looked real bad, and fortunately it wasn't. You go further back in the history, he did Tommy John all the way back in 2016, but he's 7 years removed from that. So I don't know if that's as much of a concern for McClanahan.
He just throws really hard, throws a hard breaking ball. I think he's just, in that upper end of injury risk due to his arsenal as much as anything. But he also doesn't have the disastrous seasons on his resume as Rodón. Is that why you're thinking it's harder? Like you could definitely talk yourself into 150 innings as the over/under for him next year.
No, it's harder for the sake that you're talking about a guy that might go near the first round.
Yeah,
there's a much higher price. Like I think.
What if he doesn't pitch anymore this year, though? Don't you think he'd given you? I don't know if he's giving you first round value. Let's actually, we can figure this out.
Shane McClanahan, if he didn't pitch again this year, but went through a normal winter and looked like he was going to be ready for opening day and not have any restrictions to start next season, I think he'd probably be a third rounder going into next season. Something in that pick 35 to 45 range. Yeah, I just think people, they love the talent, rightfully so. And it might start lower and creep up with all the reports of good news. But I could
Shane McClanahan right now has earned $12 and is the 17th best pitcher.
That number seems low for the 17th best pitcher. Regardless,
but the earned value, you mean?
Yeah, doesn't that seem light?
Yeah, but I suppose he's already losing innings on the people ahead of him.
Yeah. No, I mean
Cole's at $27.
He's 15th on the RotoWire calculation, so it's the right ballpark.
Yeah, 15th, 17th. But it's going to get worse if he doesn't pitch anymore. But he still will have returned good value. I mean, there's worse situations. Rodón, Severino. Who are the first rounders though? Cole is number one.
Strider, Cole and Strider are your two easy first round pitchers right now. Are those two?
And they made it. Was Woodruff a turn in the second?
Woodruff, if I remember correctly, was 2-3 turn. I'll pull it up here in just a second. And then Corbin Burns, I think, was still a back of the first rounder in some drafts, but not. And
he's still he's returning 12th. He's 12th. So those first three picks were okay ones.
Yeah, Garrett Cole just keeps doing Garrett Cole stuff.
But Shane, what was Shane? A second rounder?
I think he was a second rounder. I think Shane McClanahan was consistently ahead of Woodruff. Again, this is off memory. I'm pulling up the report here.
I've got an ADP here on the auction calculator, but I don't trust those.
Love the auction calculator. Don't trust the ADP because I always forget when it takes the snapshot and how often it actually gets adjusted. Where did you think McClanahan was going? What was your memory on this one? Mid-second. I'm going to look at March drafts only. I should have this saved. It should be just nailed to the wall. McClanahan, great podcasting. McClanahan had an ADP of 39 in March across all formats. It's a little later than I remembered. I thought he was in the second round. Maybe for some of the main boards that were circulating.
Well, so he's not going to go up from there. But how do you feel about a return of $12 and 115 innings on a third round pitcher?
You're disappointed.
I don't feel that bad.
You're disappointed, but you're not blaming him for failure within the league. Yeah. I mean, look. Here's how this went down. Okay, Shohei Ohtani being both. You can't use him as both in FBC. He was the first pitcher, air quotes, off the board. If you want to count him as that. It was Cole first. This is just the last week of March. Cole was the first pitcher off the board, kind of end of round one. Corbin Burns was right there with them. I think you're very happy with Cole, especially if you, in the head-to-head, you preferred Cole to Burns. You were right. You've received more value so far. Strider was the next pitcher off the board, kind of in the middle of round two. DeGrom, which unfortunately was big injury bust. Sandy Alcantara. How happy are you with Sandy right now? You took Sandy up there in the late part of round 2.
Yeah, Sandy, I don't know what he has returned. He's the biggest healthy bust in baseball this year, I feel like.
Yeah, because the ERA, well, there's 2 reasons. The ERA has been up above 4. The whip's been just around 1.2.
He's cost you money.
4 wins this season.
He's cost you $7 by the auction calculator. 99th best pitcher. If you had Clark Schmidt, you would have done better.
That's unbelievable to me. Like I didn't. There's sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time, and not having Sandy Alcantara was more about that for me in the snake drafts I was in this year. I wasn't telling people to avoid him. I just thought, not for me, that spot. I'll take someone else. I'll do something else here. Aaron Nola, Shane McClanahan, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. That rounded out the top 10 pitchers. That was, again, counting Shohei Ohtani as part of that. If you don't count Ohtani, Brandon Woodruff creeps in.
Most of those are good deals.
I mean, Woodruff missed a ton of time. He just came back. So, hey, since we're talking about Woodruff, the line was pretty good for his first start back. 9 Ks, just 2 earned runs, 5 innings pitched, no walks through 85 pitches. Ended up taking a loss because the Brewers couldn't score any runs. But how did you feel about the arsenal? How did it look compared to typical Woodruff numbers and what we saw at the very beginning of the season before that nearly 4-month-long absence?
I thought it looked good. I thought he was near dominant, and it wasn't a perfect line, but 9 strikeouts, 0 walks, and 5 innings. I know it was also Pittsburgh, but 2 homers is not ideal, but he kept him solo. And in terms of his velo, let's give him one more start. It's also, sitting 95.6 is down from where he was, but it's also pretty good still. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not ringing the alarm bells yet.
Yeah, I'm way in on this being a good first start back, and it's important for the Brewers, but it's very important if you waited this out from a fantasy perspective. That's a long time with no IL spots. If you had IL spots, that wasn't as big of a deal. I think you're pretty excited about what you saw overall.
I think the hardest thing is going to be like, what if he's okay for a little bit, and the velo thing ends up being a little prescient, and he's not great. It's like I have him in Otternew in the Experts League, where there's a price attached to him, right? So you're in this keeper league, and Brandon Woodruff is a $31 pitcher for me there, right? There's going to be a tough decision waiting for me at the end of the season where, do I want him at a 30? There's an automatic increase in the Otternew. So do I want him at $33? Given what he's done. And I think if the velo comes up a little bit, I think I might keep him, because I tend towards keeping expensive guys when my team is in contention. And, hoping that, I've got Gossman, Glasnow, Woodruff at the top of that rotation with Kirby. It's like, well, this could be an amazing rotation. I'm, right now in third. So it's like, yeah, I think I would keep Woodruff for $33. But if he doesn't get the velo back and the answers aren't as good and the results aren't as good going forward, I may not. So I think he's still, a tough decision in some keeper leagues.
Yeah, I think in leagues with salary components, especially, you're going to see a good number of teams willing to throw Brandon Woodruff back as a non-keeper, and we'll see what happens with that price once he's back up in drafts here in 2024. But
the smoke that's gathering is not great. I mean, there's been a couple of like near escapes where you're like, well, you can't feel your fingertips, and like, oh, that's thoracic outlet, you're in trouble. And then it ends up being Raynaud's or something, and he comes back and he's fine. It's like there's gathering smoke around Brandon Woodruff.
Right.
There's other people that might be, I know there's people who have a bigger distaste for injury risk and would say that they're already totally out on it.
It could be, because if you play the workload game with Brandon Woodruff, I mean, look back at his career last year: 153 in a third, 179 in a third. The year before that, 120.
Those ones convinced me that he could be a horse,
Yeah.
But if you look back further, there's lower numbers.
Yeah. It's not quite what you'd expect to see. When you, in your mind, you're like, oh, there's got to be at least one 200 inning season in there. No, there's not. There's only two above
not
150.
Even 180, yeah.
So that's it's going to be tough, but I think these next couple months with a lot of these injured guys, that will reveal a ton about our expectations for the future. How about Max Fried's return?
My one thing that I would say, just like, generally, and when it comes to pitching strategy and stuff, is that you can, focus on bulk in the middle innings. And, I think I did that in my main event with Jordan Montgomery, Jameson Taillon, and I forget who else, but these sort of, maybe a Michael Lorenzen type or something where, you're like, oh, well, he'll at least give me 120 innings. He's been pretty healthy. He hasn't given up a ton of innings. He hasn't done a ton of innings in the past, but he's coming off a good season as a starter. I don't know. Take Lorenzen's name out, but you get the sort of tie on, who was the other name I said?
Montgomery,
right? Like innings eater, kind of boring. You can still get in trouble there. I mean, for every Jordan Montgomery, there's a Jameson Taillon, So, I would just say that I like to mix in injury risk with other types of risk and have a kind of a diverse approach to risk in my rotations.
Yeah, I'm looking through the ADP report, just the late pitchers, and thinking about the players I liked and what it's been a really strange year. It hasn't been this group of, oh, these were the obvious late round guys that popped. Like it didn't really play out that year. I mean, even going back to the injury risk kind of SP3 range, which in ADP terms is after pick 100 and usually before pick 160 or so. Chris Sale didn't look great at first, started to look better. He got hurt again. So you haven't really been thrilled if you picked him around pick 125, having to just deal with the absences and the ups and downs of having him on your roster. Kershaw was the earliest of that group by the end of March. At least his health was consistent for the first half of the season. Then he got hurt, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the year. But you're going back from, yeah, I was a genius for being on Kershaw to, oh, wait, that's why I got the discount on Kershaw.
Yeah, sort of, no, there it is. There's the other shoe.
You're taking your medicine now in that regard. You look at other guys that popped in that range, though. Jesus Luzardo, that was a big hit. That he was getting the injury discount, didn't have the old age discount packed on, of course, being a younger starter. But there were a lot of questions about whether or not Luzardo could just stay healthy as a big league starter over a full season. And he's gone a long way over the past calendar year plus now of suggesting that he might be able to do that. I liked Freddie Peralta in this range. He stayed healthy. The velo is good. We've talked about him maybe being capable of a big second half. It needs to happen for him to really make value in this range. Dustin May, injury discount. Oops, that didn't work out, unfortunately. So it was a bit of a minefield in this range where you could make a lot of mistakes. Tyler Glasnow also went in this range. Are you happy with Tyler Glasnow in leagues where you didn't have an IL spot around pick 150?
I've been thinking about this one a lot because I did buy a fair amount of Glasnow shares, and in fact, I do want to point out there's basically 2 months left still. So if he is healthy for the next 2 months and gets up to 125 innings, that's kind of where I had the over under. If I get 125 innings of a 3 ERA in this offensive environment with that 35% strikeout rate, then I'm going to be 100% fine with it. So there is a little bit of TBD on this, but another way I look at it is I think that the offensive environment has taken guys that might have had okay seasons and been productive, and maybe stratified it to where the guys who are struggling have like 6 and 7 ERAs. You know what I mean? Like there's something about the pitch clock, and when like things are going downhill, I feel like pitchers can't stop it anymore. And I feel like also with the health issues continuing, teams sometimes are just leaving people out there to die on the mound. I mean, that Ben Lively situation was awful. where they just let him give up like 18 runs or something and then put him on the IL at the end of the game because they didn't want to, go to any other arms. So, there's been this weird stratification where the deep sleepers, and I'm going deeper than what you're talking about even, it's been harder to hit on them. So, for example, I have I have 10 deep sleeper pitchers, right? And I did. If I was more embarrassed about this, I wouldn't bring it up. But I did okay. I think this is 400 plus ADP, so these are deep ones. Braxton Garrett, I would call that a hit so far. Ken Waldichuk, that's a swing and a miss. Mitch Keller, it hasn't been as great recently, but in some, I think you'd still take it. Tyler Megill, that's a miss. Kyle Gibson, I think, I don't know actually where to put him. He's been useful in deeper leagues, I guess I'd say.
Probably a slight hit because 11 wins is a big deal. Ratios aren't great, but bulk with Ks, 117 Ks and 11 wins in a deeper league is all right.
Yeah. Then when 500 plus, Matt Brash, I mean, not as a starter, but if you have him on your team, you're probably getting some actual value out of him. DL Hall, that's been an injury thing. Brian Abreu didn't become a starter, so these are a lot of misses. Shintaro Funjami, big miss, and then I end with Tyler Wells, who I think even with what's happening right now, I think you have to call a hit at 500 ADP. You have to have a very deep league to even go to 500.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say what my point is. That's about I still am proud of it because I think that's like a 40% hit rate on pitching prospects that you could take 400 plus. So I'll take that. I think maybe it's a little bit worse than average for me, but it's okay. But I also have hitter sleepers from that same time, done in the same format, 10 guys, and they're all hits. I mean, Max Kepler at 400 plus ADP, I don't think you hate it, but maybe it's not the best. But Candelario's on that list. JD Davis is on this list. JP Crawford is having the season of his career. Michael Massey might be a miss, but he's turning it around. Adam Frazier was a hit. Like, have you looked at his numbers? Nolan Jones it took a while to get going, but I think he's a hit. And then a miss here with Stone Garrett and maybe Trevor Larnach and Josh Smith. But that's already, you're talking 600 ADP when you're talking about those guys. So I would say that my hitter list actually did better relative to my pitching list. And I wonder if that is because of the pro offense rule changes.
Yeah.
The pitch clock, the stealing the bases, the everything. The ball's even flying a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could be a part of that. And thinking about where the top end pitchers came from this year, seeing that many of those starters were drafted early or reasonably early. I guess the biggest exceptions were Nathan Eovaldi at a discount just outside the top 200. He's been hurt.
A big tout of mine, yeah.
Big hit, though, because you got $23 worth of value so far. He's been like a top 5 starter up to this point. He'll fall if he's not healthy enough to pitch. Zach Eflin was one of the big late hits. That was, if you're in on Eflin and your reason was the Rays signed him to a multi-year deal, the reason doesn't matter. If you were in, you were right.
He's a pretty good multiple pitches and command guy.
Right. And so on the waiver episode on Friday, we were talking about Zach Littell a little bit, and he has some of those characteristics, right? I mean, the Rays have a clear type. Yeah.
Command.
Sometimes it takes a little time for it to all come together, but sometimes it's also just an opportunity.
For starting pitchers, 100%. Like, yeah, there's definitely value in a guy that's been struggling but has pitches and can put them together. Like, that's definitely something that I look for in pitching sleepers.
So I was trying to make a point on the Friday show to say that it's not just the Rays that do this. Like, the Rays get a lot of credit for doing it, but plenty of other teams find a pitcher that some other team was using in a different role, and they change some things. They bring back pitches, they add something. Do you think there's anyone from this deadline that people are not really talking about that could actually, with a fresh start, emerge to be a little more interesting than we thought? I mean, like, Bailey Falter was sort of interesting in Philadelphia, and getting more runway, getting a chance in Pittsburgh, I'm sort of curious to see what adjustments he can make. He's going to get more chances to start there, at least in the short term, than he would have as without the trade. He was stuck. He was stuck at AAA. He wasn't going to get another chance anytime soon for the Phillies.
Yeah, I mean, those he's the guy that stuck out to me, and because I don't think Weathers may have a chance, but I actually kind of think that Weathers' future, Ryan Weathers in Miami, may be in the pen, because we can see him maxing out at 97, and he doesn't have great shape on his fastball. So one way to, outstuff a bad shape on your fastball is to just throw it harder and harder. So if he's at 107, what if you just keep him to one inning? You can get him up to 108, 109. Does he have that in there? That could be a way to make him a sweeper guy, give him a 90-mile-an-hour cutter, and have a 97-mile-an-hour fastball. And who cares if it's not the best shape? I mean, this has worked for them with Jesus Luzardo. And maybe that even works as a starter. If they can just get the velo out of him like they did with Luzardo. Who else was traded at the deadline that we should be thinking about?
So Bailey Falter. We'll start with him. I'll pull up a couple more names. Do you think there's anything interesting with him that the Pirates can tweak?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a really interesting release, and I think he's not someone that is super obvious in terms of being able to pick him up. I think he at least works when you haven't seen him very often. The model always kind of liked his changeup, but he told me that the model was wrong and that his changeup sucks. So
source pitcher himself.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. What the plan is with him. But again, yeah, 2 at least league average breaking balls, and there's always role change and stuff like that can make him more useful or coax something out of him. But good command, and that's step 1 of the Eflin process.
The other guy that I think was popular from the weekend in some more competitive leagues was Cole Reagans, getting a chance in Kansas City. So what do you see in that arsenal? And Kansas City's track record getting pitching to reach its full potential in recent years has been poor, but do they have something to work with the Reagans?
Yeah, I think so. Because, we've seen as a velo boost for Reagans. And that happened even before the trade, so they don't have to coax that out of him. It's a little bit related to some role change. Like he throws harder in shorter stints, right? So it's kind of hard to tell. But he's even in his last game, because in his last game he pitched 5 innings or 6 innings, 94.9. And last year he was 91-92. So the velo is sticking around. I think that's good news. I think there's enough there. In fact, Cole Reagans was one of my favorite pickups this past pickup period. I know that I'm going to be nervous throwing him against Boston.
Get him twice this week. Beautiful.
I see a league average fastball, above league average cutter, above league average curve, and maybe a good enough change that you're like, hey, this is 4 pitches, and you can just mix it up and decent command. So I like Reagans. I picked him up in a bunch of leagues.
Yeah, he kind of made the rundown on Friday for having the 2 starts, and Chase Silseth was not discussed on Friday, and he was picked up in a few places where available because he had 12 Ks against the Mariners on Sunday. Only 4 earned runs allowed over his last 3 starts since rejoining that rotation in Anaheim after the All-Star break. A 26-3 strikeout to walk ratio during that span. That was just 17 2/3 innings. That was against the Mariners, Atlanta on the road, and I think the Yankees without Judge, but not an easy stretch of schedule whatsoever. And certainly there's opportunity for Silseth if he continues to pitch well. It seems like he's made some adjustments, having spent some time in the bullpen, going to AAA. It just doesn't look like the exact same guy that we saw debut a season ago.
No, he has an entirely new breaking ball, I believe. And I'm trying to see what Stuff thinks of it, but I'm just looking at movement profiles, and his slider now has 3 to 4 inches more break than it did in the early season. And it also doesn't go as hard in terms of the average slider velo. He's down to 81, 82, where he was more 83, 85 early in the season. That's a definite trade-off because velo on breaking balls is super important. And so, it's actually kind of funny. Stuff Plus liked the slider a little bit before, and it likes it a little bit now. So it actually hasn't changed that much in some, because what he gave up in velo, he gained in movement. This model has never really liked his splitter, but I think that that's something that it just may be missing something, because you've got good grades on the splitter in terms of scouting grades and in terms of what people think of Chase Siltha, right? Isn't that's his pitch?
Yeah, the slider's getting the best results right now. Opposing hitters are hitting 097 against it and slugging 161. But between the slider and the splitter, he's got 2 pitches that get a good number of whiffs, and he gets some whiffs with pretty much everything he throws. But he's become a guy that uses a deeper arsenal. It's 5 pitches that he's using at least 10% of the time right now, between the 4-seamer, the sinker, the cutter, the splitter, and the slider. That's a lot of ways to attack hitters. And I think
a splitter, with a 182 average or 364 slugging, I mean, that's not great. But yeah, put in the context of other pitches, I feel like this is a useful one. I would say that I might like Ragans just a little bit more. Just an 80 mile an hour breaking ball is just smells more like a curve to me, not necessarily a slider, and I kind of feel, I don't know why I like Ragans a little bit better. I like Ragans a little bit better, but I think they're both on the cusp, especially if you're talking about a 12-team league. They are definitely matchups plays, and neither of them I think is you have to pick them up, right? I don't think they're in a 12-team, but in a 15-team league, they're matchups plus, maybe matchups plus put on your bench type thing.
Yeah. I think that's the right way to look at them right now. But I would not be discouraged by what we saw upon arrival last year from Silseth for all the reasons we talked about. This is a different look and good velo on top of all that too. We had another player return. We talked about Brandon Woodruff a little bit earlier. Max Fried came back on Friday. 6 scoreless, 8 Ks, no walks, got the win. He was really, really good. And you think about the things that could go wrong for Atlanta come the postseason. For me, would be the starting pitching doesn't hold up, or the bullpen's running on fumes. They've done a good job adding depth and having plenty of quality guys in that group. But a healthy Max Fried is sort of a big part of them being probably the most dangerous team in the league come playoff time. I think they were probably that without him, but getting Fried back is just huge for them, because you got Spencer Strider and Max Fried is one of the better 1-2s you could have in a series.
Yeah, and I wonder, there was a big sort of discussion. We had the Bryce Elder is blue on Savant discussion. And I don't know when that was, but I'm just going to take July 1 as a marker here, and 6.60 ERA.
He's got 13 strikeouts in his last 30 innings.
And 12 walks.
Yeah.
So I guess in the battle over StatCast, blue wins on this one. I think it's also just, in terms of scouting pedigree and, what people expected, I think, Elder was just a person that people liked based off of minor league numbers. I don't even think the scouts liked him as much. So, yeah, that was an interesting moment in time. And I think that means that, I agree with you, Braves need Fried. And I don't know what's the rotation now. I think people are worried about Morton. I see Morton as a guy still has the elite breaking ball, but never had elite command. And the fastball's, kind of sloughing off. And so, he kind of drops in my rankings a little bit every time, but he still throws 95. He still has that curveball. So I'm I'm still going to go to battle with Charlie Morton and Spencer Strider, obviously first or second best pitcher in the big leagues. Now you got Fried. I guess Elder stays in the rotation. But Chirinos and Elder are the back end right now. I think Soroka has another chance to take that back. None of these guys are going to be in the playoff rotation, I guess.
Probably not. We had a question from OJ about Yonny Chirinos. So he goes to Atlanta.
He's another blue Statcast guy, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So OJ did some splits on the pitch modeling leaderboard over at Fangraphs and saw Yonny had a much better stuff number just in the brief time he was with Atlanta. So is there anything going on there? Any adjustments he's made, or just a small sample blip?
Oh, that's interesting. Let me see. The first place I look always is usage, and yes, look at that, 100%. That's amazing. That really, you just gotta look at usage, because with Atlanta, he has thrown the splitter 40% of the time. I guess that actually started with Tampa.
I was a little surprised, given their need for innings, that
Tampa let him go.
Were willing to let him go. Just he's had enough success there. And I know it's a lot of lost time due to injuries. I mean, between the shortened season in 2020, injuries knocked him out for all of 2021, like 7 innings last year trying to get back. So he threw 18 1/3 innings over 3 seasons. So I mean, I get it, but 3.74 ERA, 1.17 WHIP for his career. Not a bad resume.
There's also a weird thing going on. So, there's disagreements on sinkers. I think Sam Moll, is an example of this, where I think Driveline has a sinker as average or maybe a little bit above average, and my model has it below. So sinkers is a place where models disagree. And then there's also, very interestingly, this year, the sinkers are doing better relative to other pitch types than they have in the past. And I don't know if that's just because players are all in on focusing on hitting the high fastball, the high four seam, and they've been training on that for a while, and they've let some of their sinker training go. Maybe they don't see sinkers as much, so they're not being trained by in-game play. And also, the sinkers they do see are probably better ones than they were in the past. So, Yonny Chirinos, Bryce Elder, Sam Moll, like these guys are all guys that are sinker primarily. I don't see anything in the movement or velo numbers that changes, other than I would say, only capturing a period of time where he threw the splitter 40% of the time and has become kind of a two-pitch pitcher with the splitter and the sinker. That's probably what's showing up in when you check him out. And I think that the Braves are fine with that because they're going to barely get 5 innings. They got 3.2 innings from him one time and 5 innings the next time. I don't know how useful that makes him in fantasy. I mean, that's 8 2/3 innings with 7 earned runs for Atlanta. So,
yeah. And OJ's situation was a 4x4 NL only league. So an old school NL only league. I think that's kind of like
that means no strikeouts.
Means no strikeout. That's good for Yonny. Like that takes away a category where he's a slight negative, even when he's good.
I wonder if he's going for the strikeouts with all these splitters.
Well, it'll make him more effective if he can get the K rate up from the 13% so far this year. So I think there's at least a chance that Yonny can keep a spot over Bryce Elder if the Braves reach a point where they have to choose between the two, because Elder has really, really struggled in the why would the Rays give up on him question. It's not the first player we've seen this season. I believe this is the last year Yonny Chirinos has minor league options left. So after the season, can't send him down without passing him through waivers. Getting ahead of that, having a pretty crowded roster, that's probably a big part of why Tampa Bay decided they were okay with moving on. Thanks for that question, OJ. I got one here from Archer. Archer had a question about Jose Abreu. He's in a 12-team AL-only roto league. I've been stuck with Abreu, and he's slumping again. You guys talk about playing time being important, but at what point is it more important to just take the better player? I think this is a related question. Also, how do you see Mike Moustakas' at-bats playing out in the future? It might be an alternative available in the case of Mike Moustakas. But to the first question, Abreu, for a little while, looked like he was going to turn it around. It seemed like there was a window in late May, June, where he started to hit a little bit. The numbers are still bad for the season. The K rate's still up. The barrel rate's still at a low, really an all-time low for him at 7%. It's not a case where he's pounding the ball on the ground and hitting it hard. He's not doing that. 39.5% is the second lowest hard hit rate he's ever posted as a big leaguer. In a mono league, this still is probably okay because a lot of the alternatives will play less than Abreu. So your runs, your RBIs are still going to be better from a guy struggling than from someone who plays well in a part-time role. But using Moustakas as a comparison, I don't think Moustakas' playing time share in a crowded Angels infield is necessarily as large as what Abreu is going to get, but can he make up the difference by being a better per plate appearance player if they're using him mostly against righties and sitting him against lefties?
I mean, if he has a full-time lefty role, I'm putting that in air quotes, it's not full-time, but if he's like basically in 2/3 of a platoon, I think I could give Moustakas the stamp of approval here because, they're definitely the supporting numbers for his offensive output are pretty good. But does he have that when Trout comes back? So you've got Trout, Grichuk, Moniak is one platoon probably. Renfroe is, you throw him in all the time. Otani's the starter DH. Whoever, Rengifo or Neto at short. If Rendon is back, maybe there's a chance here. So Moustakas, Drury?
Neto's hurt again right now too, so Rengifo's playing short.
So maybe between all those injuries, Moustakas is just going to have a full-time lefty role going forward, right? Because even if Neto comes back, Rengifo is a righty, so it'd be Rengifo or Drury. Rengifo is a switch hitter.
Yeah, Moustakas is only.
I think it's all on Rendon,
times.
Dude. I think it's all on Rendon, and he's shut down for at least 2 weeks after a bone bruise on July 22nd. So we should be getting new news soon. So my advice would be, if this was my team that I was running, I would be waiting for that update on Rendon, because I think if Rendon comes back, it gets a little hairy for Moustakas.
I think I'd be tempted to just take Moustakas at this point if that was a choice that I had. I mean, I think
Jose Abreu is not. I mean, hard hit rate on Fangraphs is Baseball Info Solutions, so it's a stringer. But Jose Abreu has 0 hard hits in August and had 26% in July, and he peaked at 35% in June. He had like a 400 slugging in July. 420 and a 105 in August. Like it's not good. In fact, the first and second half numbers line up almost exactly, except for a difference in walk rate.
So are you buying a 267, 335, 431 rest of season line from Abreu with like a half dozen homers? His projections are better than Moustakas' by kind of a lot, and I'm just not sure I buy it. The power numbers are projected to be very similar. So if you think Moustakas plays as much, he has to exceed the projection he has anyway to earn that playing time, which he's been doing. I don't know. I think this could actually work out just fine. And I'm at the point now, maybe it's because I believed in Anthony Rendon for so long. I've gone the other way. I've gone full heel. Like, he's not coming back.
I lean Abreu, especially in only leagues. I lean towards the boring guy that'll get in there and just get me, chip away at RBI and runs an RBI, and whatever I get. I would lean towards Abreu.
All right, we've got a few more mailbag questions we'll get to. Thanks for sending that one in, Archer. Zach on Twitter wanted to know, what is our take on Miguel Vargas going forward for Dynasty Leagues? The simple answer for me is he had a thumb injury going all the way back to spring training. I'm not convinced that ever quite got right. They didn't really give him that much time off. He's down in the minors right now. Did you see anything from Vargas during this season, that would lead you to be less optimistic about him in the future?
I mean, it's just such a low swing rate that it I feel like it puts so much pressure on when he does swing. I do wonder how that feeds into his thumb injury, because there was this iconic moment where he wasn't allowed to swing, and they had all these people at the WBC, so they had to play him in spring, and he just wasn't allowed to swing, and he still got a bunch of walks. I wonder how that affected his approach once he got to the big leagues. A 109 max EV and a 6% barrel rate. The name that gives me the willies when I look at lineups, like when I look at stats like this, is Abraham Toro.
No, come on, don't Abraham Toro him.
No,
I thought you were going to say Jose Miranda. I thought you were going to say it was like that.
No, he has a better walk rate. I mean, he has better plate skills than Miranda.
Definitely better plate skills,
and I think better defensive value.
Yeah, probably.
I think. Yeah. Vargas is going to get another chance. I love the 239 ISO in AAA. I don't love the fact that his max EV in AAA has been 106.1. So he's still not hitting the ball hard. However, I also know this. I don't know if he went already, but if he hasn't, they did send a bunch of players to Driveline for weighted bat, like sort of bat speed training. And if he hasn't done that, he could really take off with this because he has all the skills in terms of plate recognition, contact ability, really good foundational skills. If you could just boost that max EV to like 111 and the barrel rate to like 9-10%, he could really explode. So I think there's like still a lot of reason to be excited about him. And I would buy him cheap if I could.
Yeah, love trying to trade for Miguel Vargas right now. If I'm playing for the future, playing for now, I mean, sure, playing for now, you could stash him if you've got enough spots, but I think he's a great buy low right now coming off of this disappointing season.
There's a reason why the Mariners traded for Toro, and I think and they trade for players like him, which is you start with a foundation of a good plate discipline and contact, and you hope they grow into the power. And I feel like you can talk about that intuitively, anecdotally, about how many people in the past have had good plate skills and grew into the power. And I bet you there's research that suggests that those guys are good, like Jake Cronenworth types. Like, this is we're establishing a little bit of maybe a Dave Cameron type here. But if they do all these things well, other than the power, then could you coach them into the power? Can you be more selective at the plate, even like target high fastballs and so on and so forth? Like there are different strategies or bat speed training. Like JP Crawford is having the season of his career due to bat speed training, and it's not like he suddenly became a 30 homer hitter. It's just hey, him with 12 to 15 homers is a lot better than him before.
Yeah, just maxing out with what you have. I think that's always worth doing. And I think with Vargas, we're seeing better results in his brief time with AAA than we've seen from Abraham Toro during his time at that level. Vargas being a lot younger, too, gives him some time to get right. That's true. I think so much of what we've failed to see on the power side from Vargas this year goes back to that thumb injury. They just didn't give him time off. I think if they give him some time off to heal, gets back at it this offseason, he'll get there. One more question here. This one's from Kelly on Twitter. What's going on with my guy, Mason Miller? And the A's, I think, are playing him real slow through that rehab because in reality, he may need to be carefully handled for 2 more seasons, given all the time he's lost due to injury throughout his career.
I mean, he threw a bullpen session this weekend and live hitters next week. And I think part of that process of carefully managing him is getting him to any sort of number this year that you can get him to healthy, like any sort of number, because for 2022, the innings number was 14. So for 2023, the innings number is 28, 29. So if they could just get it to 30 or 40, then maybe they can get it to 60 or 70 next year. It's as exciting stuff as it is unexciting bulk.
Right. And I think the plan, I think you have to try, if you can get him back through a rehab assignment, it's going to take a few weeks. If he could pitch
3 starts in September,
5, if he somehow by September 1st is ready to come back and just pitch 5 innings every time out for the rest of the season, that's about 6 starts, 30 innings there. Count the rehab innings along the way. If you could just get to 70 or 80 innings, then at least you're talking about 110, 120 being possible.
Someone who's more draftable next season.
Yeah, but it's gonna be really tough to rely on Mason Miller.
What is it? What is that number for you? I mean, he's at 29 right now. Like, what if he gets to 50? He's not draftable for you next year.
Probably not. I mean, maybe for. Do you like players like this more in leagues where you can get them off the roster when they are inevitably unavailable, either because they're hurt or because they're shut down?
Yeah,
for
it seems like
management.
a poor bet in draft and hold. Where you're like, okay, I'm drafting him in draft and hold because I know those 50 innings are going to be awesome. Well, when are those 50 innings going to come? Do you get all those 50 innings? Because sometimes they they activate him or, send him down at the wrong times. And you're like,
I don't know. Like I was thinking it's a little bit counterintuitive in my head. I'm like, I kind of like him more in a 50 round format because I look at my rosters anyway.
Just like, I just want 50 innings from this guy at some point.
A bunch of guys break and you can't replace them. So it comes back to a version of the conversation we had about Rodón earlier, where it's like, you don't want 4 or 5 guys that have really limited innings. But if he's super cheap, Mason Miller, where I just get him whenever he's around. I don't have to worry about playing the game of, do I wait 2 weeks for him to come back? Like that's the hard part of leagues where you can cut him.
You get in trouble still because there are going to be so many guys who have this injury discount. And then, the only way you can do Mason Miller is if you only took 1 other injury discount or 2 other injury discounts. Because if Mason Miller is like the 5th injury discount guy that you're going to put on your draft and hold rotation, like I've done this before. It doesn't end well.
No, it's you get one guy like that with a really tight innings cap. You have to believe a lot in the talent. I think in Mason Miller's case, those lines actually intersect where they need to justify the gamble. But what price are we talking about? He's got to go outside the top 300 overall before you're thinking about it, right? You can't commit a pick in the first 20 rounds to a guy that may only throw 80 innings next year.
I think it has to be after 25 even, because there's just no way that I could slot him in a starter's role in my, the way, like, he'd have to be in the bench picks. And even then I think maybe past 30, because that's like, there's like my strategy in draft and holds a lot of like 6 starters, when I get to 30 and 35th round, because there aren't that many pitchers around anymore, but 6 starters are going to give you like 100 innings, So I took a lot of 6 starters in there, and Mason Miller versus a 6 starter. We're like, this other guy, I kind of, I've talked myself into him. I like this guy a little bit, and he's a 6 starter, and I think I can get 120 innings out of him. Might take him over Mason Miller. So I mean, that's where the discussion comes in. I think around 6 starters. Expectations
are already higher for a guy who's not even projected to have a starting job because he's at least a bulk reliever until he gets that opportunity. In a lot of cases, depending on how advanced that pitcher is. Sometimes that 6 starter is someone you're waiting for at AAA, but doesn't matter as much in that draft and hold. Thanks a lot for that question, Kelly. We are going to sign off on our way out the door. A quick reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic for just $2 a month for the first year at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. You can find Eno on Twitter at Saris. You can find me at Derek Van Riper. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.